بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم أفضل الذكر بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء وسيد المرسلين حبيب إله العالمين أبا القاسم المصطفى محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المنتجبين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا يقول الله تعالى في كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ولقد نصركم الله ببدر وأنتم أذلة فاشكروا الله لعلكم تتقون. My dear respected brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. On this day of the 18th of the holy month of Ramadan, we honor and commemorate a wonderful achievement within the legacy of the history of Islam. A legacy that impacts each and every one of our lives, because if it was not for this event, in the second year after Hijrah, in the middle of the holy month of Ramadan, in a hot, dry afternoon, among adversaries that only wanted to see the blood of the Muslims spilled on the ground, the event of the Battle of Badr took place, in which, had it not been for the stance of those 313 Muslimin Mujahideen, Islam would have perished and never ceased to see the next day. Therefore, we owe it to those early Badriyun who laid everything out in what would be the first war in the history of the religion of Islam. The circumstances surround this event as followed. Number one, this war was not an offensive war. It was a defensive war. As you all know, and living in the 21st century U.S. today, we always hear this message of the Holy Prophet being a warlord, that he was interested in seeking war. Rasulullah is further than to be mentioned in the same sentence as the title warlord. Rasulullah, if you look at the definition of a warlord on Google, you get the likes such as Adolf Hitler, Genghis Khan. You get people that genuinely were bloodthirsty. The messenger of God should not be mentioned in the same sentence as these riffraffs, for example. Whereas you see that the battle that began the first of all of these conflicts, the Battle of Badr, was a defensive war. It followed in the same manner that the messenger of God would follow any pursuit. He would first begin by providing the hujjah. That's his role. He needs to show the proof. When you receive the proof, if you reject it, the Prophet won't do anything. يَهْدِ اللَّهُ مَنْ يَشَاءُ وَيُضِلُّ مَنْ يَشَاءُ. Oftentimes people misunderstood these ayat. That يَهْدِ اللَّهُ مَنْ يَشَاءُ, God guides whoever He wants to guide, is incorrect. Because that's not fair of Allah, choosing people He wants and choosing people He wants to then misguide too. وَيُضِلُّ اللَّهُ مَنْ يَشَاءُ. It's God allows whoever wants hidayah to be guided. And God allows you, if you want to be misguided, to be misguided. Because God is not here to force feed people. So the job of the messenger of God is to just show you the proof. If you want misguidance, I'm not compelling you. And this is the beauty of your free will, to make the decision you want to choose, which path you want to go to. So at the end of it, you cannot say, I was forced. Rather, it was my own doing. After the Prophet shows the burden of the truth and gives it to the society, if society decides to refuse, the Holy Prophet would not press further. He would continue to provide alternative evidence. He would continue to provide more data. He would continue to provide more hujjaj. But at the end of the day, if you refuse, you refuse. لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. God will not impose on a soul more than it can handle. At the end of the day, that's the case. And then لكم دينكم ولي دين. Until they begin to show conflict back. That not only will I refuse your message, I'm going to fight it as well. And this is the last thing the messenger of God ever wants. The Rasul of Islam is a humanitarian, and he was sent as a rahma lil alameen. The last thing in his mind is, let me kill the people I was raised with. At the end of the day, these are people that he saw growing up. Abu Lahab is his uncle. And there are beautiful glimpses in the life of the Messenger of God where Abu Lahab actually shows that he has a heart. He says that when his young nephew is born, his heart is hurt that he doesn't have his father around. So he sends a lady who would be the servant of Abu Lahab to be the nurse of who? Of Rasulullah, the wet nurse of the Messenger of God. Who was this? Thuwaybah. Halima Sa'diyah came then afterwards to take care. These were women that were the servants of Abu Lahab. He's like, no, take care of my nephew. He's an orphan. Even in the day when they wanted to ambush the house of the Messenger of God, these aristocrats all gathered and they disguised themselves. And the Messenger of God had left by reciting these ayat that فَأَخْشَيْنَاهُمْ فَهُمْ لَا يُبْصِرُونَ, that we have blinded them and they do not see any further. The Messenger of God left the home and they came in, they saw Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen inside. But before they walked in, they said, from the windows, let's just throw stones inside his house like that. Maybe one of the stones hits him. And so Abu Lahab was next door. He says, La, don't throw any stones at him. Kill him. But be quick. Don't just throw stones like that. That's my nephew. You'll bother and you'll hurt him. Even then, he shows a family relation. It's until he begins to threaten the commodity of idolatry, because money makes the world go around. And the Bible has an interesting quote, that the love of money is the root of all evil. We may not necessarily agree with that Islamically. We think money can be used for good. It's an amplifier. If you are a good person, you will use money for good. But if you are someone that enjoys degeneracy and wasting money on drugs and things of that nature, obviously if you win the lottery, you're going to spend it on the things you already use. So it amplifies, but it can be used for both ways. In this situation, the Messenger of God found himself in a position whereby he, despite having people that grew up with him, being resistant to him, was constantly in the defensive until it reached war. War was the last straw when there was no more alternative nor escape. We as Muslims should always think like that. Before I take my brother to court, my brother who shares the same name with me, sometimes Ali, you find two brothers. One's name is Mohammed and the other's name is Haidar. And he takes Haidar to court. And you're in a country where you're a minority among a minority, and you're both Shia and the non-Shia pointing fingers, and we're just being in the middle of this saying, and I will also go to war with my fellow brother. Sometimes it's worth going an extra mile, for the sake of your name, not even you. I might not like you, but wallah, you have a name that your mother chose in the right way. For that sake, let me just let it go. There's a way we can make peace. The Messenger of God, until you decide to strike me first, in that case, there's something called justice. And Allah is adil for that. He migrates to the city of Medina, sallallahu alayhi wa ala. In that situation, you found that they could not handle. Who? The likes such as Abu Jahl. These were the top aristocrats of Mecca. Abu Lahab, his uncle. Utbah bin Rabi'ah, the father of Hind. You famously know her as the mother of Muawiyah and the grandma of Yazid. Look at this family tree, by the way. Utbah bin Rabi'ah, Abu Jahl, Abu Sufyan, Abu Lahab, Mughira bin Shu'bah, Al-As bin Wa'il, Khalid ibn al-Walid. These people were all fumed up that you come and you challenge idolatry, make a new religion, and decide to take a bunch of people to the other end of our world. Not on our watch, especially to Abu Sufyan. Abu Sufyan was the chief of the idolatry pilgrimage. People would come to do Hajj, but later on, after many years, from the Hajj of Ibrahim, it became perverted with different customs that were outside of the religion of Islam. People would do Hajj unclothed. People would do Hajj clapping in different manners that were unbefitting as a Muslim, ala millati Ibrahim al-Hanif. But then suddenly they started incorporating idols as well. 365 idols all across the Kaaba, inside it, on top of it, and around it. And so in this situation, Abu Sufyan sees if you're preaching La ilaha illallah, suddenly no one's going to worship and come from across the world. People came from India. People came from Syria, from Iraq, Babel, elsewhere, Egypt. They would all come just to pay homage and worship. But they would do shirk. And paganism was the rampant religion. In Arabic, al-Wathaniyya. They believed in these paganistic teachings. And so now it's only down to one God. These idols would literally be made by hand, by clay. One man decided to form an idol in the shape of a human, and he would say, this idol is the Lord of sustenance, and he serves with Allat and Manat and Uzza. But this idol was made from clay and also parts of dates. Now you know that a date, if you form it, it's almost manageable and you can like mesh it and make it into a figure. He was going to Mecca to sell it and he became hungry. Now, if he's hungry, he doesn't have anything to eat, he begins eating a little bit from his God. Little by little, he's eating part of his God, little by little, until he came to Mecca and he realized, I ate God. And there was that backward-minded society of jahl, whereby people know that this isn't the reality, and sometimes they would fool themselves and say, we know obviously that's not God, I just made him, but to me it represents God. And that's also shirk too, by the way. It's not the case that I'm literally thinking this rock I just carved 10 minutes ago is Allah. No, it's Allah manifested. That's also shirk as well. And sometimes we need to reflect as well. We can't just point fingers and say, this is Imam Hussein, this is Imam Ali, this is Allah to me. You can have sha'air, that's different, whereby you can have symbolism that represents something related to Imam al-Hussein. But to come and fabricate things that would enter the world of a shirk al-khafi, and the Quran makes mention of that, light degree of polytheism, you're just associating to Allah anything you like, and in addition, bid'ah, وَكُلُّ بِدْعَةٍ ضَلَالَةٍ وَكُلُّ ضَلَالَةٍ فِي النَّارِ. The Messenger of God goes to Medina. Abu Sufyan is bringing back a caravan from Syria to Mecca. And he cannot sleep from the fact that the Messenger of God has created this new movement. Some of their sons had become Muslim. Utbah ibn Rabi'ah, the father of Hind, his son Hanzala joined Islam. His other children stayed polytheists. And he's already in Medina. Abu Sufyan is furious. So he decides to do what is called, you know this very well, Chinese whispers. Fake something. If you can't make it, fake it. Make something up. Say that Mohammed just did this to me. Make a fake story. Say that this person came out of nowhere. They harassed me. You know the famous story of, by the way, this is deadly. Allah hates this. Allah hates this in the Holy Quran. He mentions that the person that makes up fabrications, to them is double the punishment. It's not true. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen says, طَعْنُ السِّنَانِ لَا طَعْنِ اللِّسَانِ. طَعْنُ السِّنَانِ, hit me with your sword before you ever strike me with your tongue. Why? Because the sword, maybe the wound will heal. But what could heal the wound of someone who you spoke about for generations? People will assume that lie is true. How can you heal that? And so, in this case, Abu Sufyan uses what we call Chinese whispers. On his way back to Mecca, Abu Sufyan says, I passed by Medina. Let me pay one of my servants some money and say to him, go to Mecca, run, and say, I came back with Abu Sufyan. Muhammad and his people ambushed us, and they tried to steal our caravan's goods, which means it's your goods as well. And they tried to kill me. But before you go, rip your shirt open as such. Take your camel and stab it where it doesn't die, but take that blood and put it on you and put it over the camel. And run back to Mecca, panting and screaming. He's like, that's going to cost you. Here you go. We just got profit. There you are. Goes back to Mecca and immediately runs into the laps of Abu Lahab, Utbah ibn Rabi'ah, Abu Jahl, Mughira, Khalid, and all these other, from the good to the bad to the ugly. And suddenly they say, now it's time we go to war. They attacked us, it's on. So they begin to assemble. Abu Lahab, he decides to dispatch his servant to go fight for him. He says to him, don't you owe me money? He says, yeah, I owe you about 4,000 dirham. Abu Lahab says, I can exempt that from you. He's like, how? Just go fight in my position. Why does Abu Lahab not want to fight? There were older people that went and fought from the adversaries. Abu Jahl is older than him. But he went and he fought. Why did Abu Lahab not want to fight? Remember the family relation? I don't want to be the one that fights my nephew. But at the same time, I have a second nephew who I know will kick us into pieces. Let me not go and participate in this upcoming battle. And that's Amir al-Mu'mineen. So he pays someone go in my position, politically. Then they look at Utbah bin Rabi'ah and they say to him, you must go and fight. Utbah bin Rabi'ah says, I'm not interested in fighting. Why? Because he has a son that joined the Muslims as well. If I'm going to fight my son, that's not going to be nice. They look at a man by the name of Umayyah bin Khalaf. Umayyah bin Khalaf, they approach him and they say, oh Umayyah, why don't you come and fight? Umayyah was the guy that took the rock and tried to punish Bilal al-Habashi for joining Islam. and he would put that hot rock heavy on his chest as he tied him to the ground on the sands of Mecca. I want you to hear these stories and think, Alhamdulillah, you can be a Muslim and not have to worry. He stripped him naked because he became Muslim, tied him to the ground in the hot summer, and he puts this boulder on his chest like this. And he says, you say La ilaha illallah, say that there is no God, but all of these gods are your true gods as well. And Bilal would say, Ahad, 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 only one God, one. Until he almost died, the Prophet heard he was about to die from this pain and torture. He had paid Abu Bakr some money. I want you to go and free him. Go. Some people give the achievement to Abu Bakr. It's not the case. The Prophet sent him to go and free him. There was a man, Ubaidullah, Khabbab ibn al-Urat. Khabbab ibn al-Urat, his master was a lady. This lady had heard he became Muslim. Do you know what she did to him? How dare you become Muslim? That's going to shake our commodity, and without my permission. She tied him against a tree. She exposed his back. She took an iron rod and puts it over the flame until it became glowing white, and began to iron his back because he said La ilaha illallah. Look at what the Muslims had to go through initially. Don't underestimate the ability to say La ilaha illallah comfortably. Look at the sacrifices these upright companions had to go through. Look at what they've been through so that today we can pray, and some people delay the salah. Some people see it lightly. They struggled and they were still saying Ahad, Ahad in the face of those that believed in La Ahad. In any case, that approach happened until they reached Utbah ibn Rabi'ah. They said, he says, I can't fight. Why? My son's there. They said, just wait a minute, we'll be right back. They go and they bring back makeup. They said, Utbah, if you're going to stay and not fight, put these on while you're at it. He's like, how dare you insult me like that? He's like, no, women stay back. If you're going to stay back, put this on. If you challenge an Arab like that, he's going to not handle it. And so he's like, I'm in now. He goes and they join. And each one promises a certain amount of force. Abu Lahab sent about 50 soldiers from his side. Utbah bin Rabi'ah sent about 100 horses. Abu Sufyan sent 700 camels. In total, about 950 forces, strong, bloodthirsty, angry, vengeful, mad, and unable to tolerate the fact that there's this new movement and they will not return until they're getting what they want. The Muslims, in their end, they had about 313 only. From the Ansar, 70. The rest, Muhajirun. And when they gathered into the valley of Badr, the Prophet got word that we're going to face these men and they're coming on their way. It takes only about a week and some days to make it from Mecca to Medina. But if you're with an army, it's going to take longer because everyone has to walk in one pace. So what happens? The Muslims know that this is time. There's nothing you can do. And subhanAllah, especially in the sands, we're deprived from that company of nature. We don't have much access to nature these days with all the cities and the movements and the cars. But if an army marches, you could actually feel the rubble and the rumble from miles away. From the marching, you can sense it, especially with sands. That's subhanAllah how it works in the grounds, in the deserts as well. So they could even sense there's an army marching. And they were specialists back then, where they could just put their heads to the ground and they could tell you how many men are coming and how many horses. That's how very adept they were by studying the ways of nature back then. Could you imagine, right? Sometimes when you're in your home and you suddenly feel something rumble and shake, it's because this big semi-truck drove by and you feel these waves happening. Now when thousands of forces come, you can also sense that, subhanAllah, through the sands. So they come and they say, Ya Rasulullah, this is happening. These guys, they're about 900 to over 1,000 maybe. We have to go meet them first. The Messenger of God saw that his responsibility was the following. He can't just be a sitting duck. And I know many like to make this comparison, that Jesus was a prophet of peace and Muhammad was a prophet of war. Where's your example? Jesus never fought. Muhammad had to fight. I mean, if you forgot something, Jesus was a private citizen. This is my master's, I know. He was a private citizen. In fact, Jesus in Matthew chapter 17, verses 20 and onwards, in Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 17, verses 20 and onwards, Jesus pays tax to the temple. Yani Jesus has to pay taxes to Judea, Philistine, where he lives. He's a private citizen. There is no dispatching warriors and fighting because that's not his condition there. Whereas Rasulullah is head of state. He would be a bad head of state if he doesn't defend his people. Yeah, he had to defend himself multiple times. Badr, Khandaq, Uhud, Hunayn, Khaybar, that's fine, but that's just the responsibility. Is it yes or no? It's absolutely that case. But notice all of them were what? Offensive or defensive? Defensive. In this situation, the Messenger of God lays out with the men and they camp outside the valley of Badr. Wadi Badr. This is a valley. And what happens is that night, they're camping. Some of them are afraid. They know they're outnumbered. So what did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala do for them? He brought down His sakina to them. That night, they slept so comfortably, the Quran says. You know when you have a big event tomorrow, some of these guys play volleyball, there's the soccer tournaments, Moja, I don't know. Imagine you have this big game tomorrow. Can you sleep normally? You're just tossing and turning. You're thinking what's going to happen. You know, when I defended a paper that I had to speak on, I had to stand and defend it in front of a couple professors. I'm going to do that again, by the way, soon for this thesis I have coming up. That night before, I was tossing and turning, Ya Allah, what if the professor just wakes up on the bad side of the bed and they're just going to be like, you know what, even though you're good, I'm going to make sure you're going to do it all over again. You're just nervous. Now imagine if it's life or death. Imagine that. But that night, Allah allowed them to sleep comfortably. Until Rasulullah says, I'm thirsty. There's a well, it's a few kilometers out that direction. Where? He's pointing south. Medina is where from Mecca? North. So where is he pointing? Towards Mecca. Who's coming from Mecca? Over hundreds of pagans that want to drink your blood. And so he says, can someone go to the well down there, in the middle of the night, and bring me water? He turns around, he says to number one, can you? He's like, not me. How about you? I'm sorry, Ya Rasulullah. I'm afraid maybe jinn will come out, not pagans. I'm afraid it's dark. You know, back then, subhanAllah, especially without any light pollution, the only source of light outside are the stars. Only source of light. And so they're out, they're dark. He's like, I'm really afraid. Who's the one man he goes to? Who says, Ya Rasulullah, why do you even bother asking me? I'll just go. It was none other than your Mawla Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. You ask me for something, whether you finish speaking the sentence or not, I'm out already. I'm gone. Imam Ali carries a container and he goes. He goes on his way and he gets to this body of water. It's a well. But the thing is, the well, doesn't it have a rope and typically a container and you bring it down and you pick up the water? It's ripped up. And so what does the imam have to do? Most people would go back. I can't go and get the water. A well is difficult to go through, by the way. It's dug and it's multiple meters into the ground. If you're in the desert, it's even deeper until you hit very moist soil that can build up with water. You know what the imam does? He jumps inside. Rasulullah sent me to do something. I'm not going back empty-handed. Many people will be like, Ya Rasulullah, it was ripped up and I couldn't do anything. I jumped inside. Imam Ali goes down inside the well. Now where is he? He's closer to the enemies. They're on his way. It's in the middle of the night. He's in the middle of the desert. No one knows where he is. And he's inside a well, deep, deep inside. What is he doing? Rasulullah's thirsty. سَمْعًا وَطَاعًا سَيِّدِي وَمَوْلَاي مُطِيعُ لِلَّهِ وَلِرَسُولِهِ. He fills up that container and he climbs out of the well. Now imagine how difficult that is. But you're talking Abu Turab alayhi salam. He comes out of the well and he goes back to Rasulullah. What should have taken probably an hour took multiple hours, however. Rasulullah looks at Amir al-Mu'mineen when he arrives, finally says, Ya Ali, what took so long though? It shouldn't take that long, typically. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen says, Ya Rasulullah, as I was on my way back, a massive gust of wind resisted in my direction. I couldn't make it easy. A massive gust of wind. After some time, I made it through. Then after some time, another massive gust of wind, preventing me from pursuing. Until a third time, another massive gust of wind. I don't know what the deal was. I was just fighting through wind randomly. Rasulullah says, Ya Ali, those were the angels of Allah. The first gust of wind was Jibreel alayhi salam, who came down with 1,000 angels to join us on tomorrow's battle. The second angel was Mikail alayhi salam, who came down with 1,000 angels to come and join us tomorrow. And the third was Israfil alayhi salam with 1,000 angels to come and support us tomorrow. And this is mentioned in the Holy Quran, that we have supported you with 3,000 angels. Then the Imam sees that it's time to go. My messenger of God has his water. They went to sleep. That night it began to rain also. So Allah did what for them? Gave them good sleep. Gave them good rain. And the next day they woke up, they were pumped. They were ready to go and fight. The Muslims were how many in number? 313. The kuffar, how many? About 950. Outnumbered 3 times. Not a battle you're going to win just by looking at it statistically. But when you're with Abu Turab and the likes such as Hamza, Sayyid al-Shuhada, you're in good hands, inshallah. And more important, Rasulullah himself. They emerge the next day and they gather. Now, the opposition, wallah, if you saw, just read the traditions, they come to the battles, they bring with them women dancing, and drums and tambourines, and they're singing and merrymaking. Sometimes remember, if you find yourself in gatherings like this, majalis ahlil lahu, wal-tarab, wal-haram, wal-fisq, wal-fusuq, avoid it because it reminds you that on the day of Badr, I would have probably been on the side of Quraysh, to be honest with you. If that's the type of content I entertain. Because they bring these, and they're merrymaking and singing and dancing. Why? You know, it reminds me of ISIS a lot. Because these guys, before they commit a crime and they kill themselves in the process, the night before they merry-make. They mess around, they'll drink a lot, they'll bring with them that jihad and nikah nonsense, whatever that is, and they bring together, and the next day they're like, if we're going to die, let's have fun as much as we can the night before. It happened many times. And you would catch these people. I remember hearing a story in 2014 in Iraq, that upon the days when they would capture these individuals who came from the pits of hell, they said, I was supposed to tomorrow go and commit suicide bombing. And so the day before, they brought us drinks to drink and women to merry-make with. But aren't you supposed to say, Khilaf, la ilaha, your flag says la ilaha? It's not the case. This is an exemption that's made by our mufti, our amir, your nonsensical amir, living the sunnah of Utbah bin Rabi'ah and Abu Sufyan. Because if you're going to die, let's have fun the day before. Look at Islam, however. You can differentiate true Islam. Make sure your attitude does not match that attitude. That's how you know if you're on haqq or batil. What are you entertaining in life? What do you find pleasure from? The Muslimin are looking at them and that's what they're doing. Going wild, having fun. Why? Because they think it's easy. Until what did Allah do last for them? He made 313 seem like it was a lot. And He made 950 seem like it was little. Such that their morality was boosted. They're less, but Allah, through His miracles, allowed 313 to look like 950. And 950 looking like 313. Do you know how much of a morality boost this gives you? Suddenly they were well armed. Who comes forth? Utbah ibn Rabi'ah, the father of Hind, the father-in-law of Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan. And he says, I am going to begin this battle with 2 of my family. My brother Shayba ibn Rabi'ah and my son Walid bin Utbah. We are the strongest on this end. Muhammad, send your strongest right now. This event literally took place today, many, many years ago. 1,443 years ago, as we are in 1,445. In the Battle of Badr on a day like today, Rasulullah was confronted with these 3. Rasulullah sends 3 of the Ansar. He looks at them, Utbah says, we will not fight you 3 right now because you're people we don't know. Rasulullah, O Muhammad, send us your best because we are the best. That's how they began wars. They began 3 versus 3 and then they all would clash afterwards. Send us people we know. Send us people that are best and our equals. So Rasulullah sends Hamza bin Abdul Muttalib. And Rasulullah sends Ubaydullah bin al-Harith bin Abdul Muttalib, Rasulullah's cousin. Rasulullah really loved this cousin of his. And Rasulullah sends last but not least. And to my right, Ali ibn Abi Talib, salawatullahi wa salamu alayh. Utbah says, these are the best. Let's begin. And so Utbah begins to fight Hamza. Shayba begins to fight Ubaydullah. And Walid, Utbah's son, Hind's brother, begins to fight Amir al-Mu'mineen. Immediately in this battle, Imam Ali rips open slices open the hand of Al-Walid. As soon as his hand is ripped open, Imam Ali then gives him one more fatal blow, he's done. It was quick, it ended quickly like that. Then Imam Ali turns and he sees, what's the status with my uncle Hamza? Hamza has fought, but because they banged the swords together, as such, both of their swords broke. And so what happens? He sees him hugging the other person. Like this sometimes if you watch, I guess, UFC or whatever, or boxing especially, at one point they begin just holding on to each other like that. So Hamza's holding on to him. Imam Ali alayhi salam says, Hamza, lower your head, duck. Hamza ducks his head. Imam Ali lays the fatal blow to Utbah. Then they turn around to their cousin, and he sees Ubaydullah wounded. His leg and thigh was sliced, and Shayba was about to kill him. Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib jumps in and kills Shayba as well, then and there. They bring back Ubaydullah. Rasulullah goes and tends to his wounds, and Ubaydullah says, Ya Rasulullah, am I going to be a shaheed? I'm dying. There's no way I'm going to revive. Rasulullah says, you will be a shaheed. He is the first of the shuhada of Badr. You will be a shaheed. He says, Ya Rasulullah, thank you for this ni'mah. Then he sees the Prophet beginning to cry. He says, Ya Rasulullah, you just said I'm going to be a shaheed. It's not sad. I'm happy. And the dead are alive. وَلَا تَحْسَبَنَّ الَّذِينَ قُتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَمْوَاتًا بَلْ أَحْيَاءٌ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ يُرْزَقُونَ. Rasulullah says, I'm not crying right now because you're being a shaheed. How I wish today I remembered my uncle Abu Talib. How I wish he was here today to see his son Ali ibn Abi Talib defend all three of you and kill all three of your enemies in this situation. How I miss him. And subhanAllah, they call Abu Talib a mushrik, la ilaha illallah, and how Rasulullah says, I miss my uncle. How I wish he was here today to see his son's performance. Then and there, the battle begins. Of course, Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib later on writes to Muawiyah in the battle of Siffin, many years later, over 30 years later. Imam Ali sends a letter to him. He says, Ya Muawiyah, why don't you fight me one-on-one? Because Imam Ali, there's a difference between a boss and a leader. Imam Ali is what? A leader. A boss may sit in the back and bring orders. A leader leads from the front. So Imam Ali, while he's the Khalifa, he leads in the front. He sends a letter, Muawiyah, you're just sitting in your tent lavishly. Why don't you fight me one-on-one? This is a Nahj al-Balagha. So that I can do to you what I did to your grandfather, Utbah, your uncle, and your other uncle. Imam Ali reminds him of what he did to him. So I can do to you what I did to your grandfather and your uncle and your other uncle. Of course, the man chickened out and decided not to do anything. The fight and the battle begins. Do you know how many the Muslims lost? 9 soldiers, that's it. One of them was Ubaydullah. Do you know how many the adversaries lost? 70. And what happened? 35 out of those 70s were single-handedly killed by Amir al-Mu'mineen himself. Over half of the opposition and the adversaries were all removed by Imam Ali alayhi salam himself. Abu Jahl is fighting. Imam Ali brings him down. Abu Jahl, while he's laying down on the ground, Ibn Mas'ud comes. Ibn Mas'ud says to Rasulullah, Ya Rasulullah, I'm short. What can I do? How can I fight? I'm like 4'7". What's my role? How can I fight in this? Some of the guys are laughing here. Speaking from experience, I don't know. What can I do? He says, you go finish off whoever's laying down on the ground. That's your role. Ibn Mas'ud sees who? Abu Jahl. He runs up to him and he wants to go finish him. Abu Jahl, do you know what he says? He says something today that really traverses history and transcends what his vision is. He says, don't kill me. I don't want a short man making it be known that a short man killed me. That day, Rasulullah said, Abu Jahl's character was worse than Fir'aun's. Why? Because Fir'aun, even though he said, Ana rabbukum al-a'la fa'budun, I am your Lord, so worship me. Abu Jahl never said that. But at least when Fir'aun was about to die, he said, Al-an amantu bi Rabbi Musa wa Harun. And what does Abu Jahl concern himself with? The height of his killer. So Ibn Mas'ud said, so what do you want me to do? He says, can you kill me at least from my chest? So I look like I am the tallest one that was killed. He says, I'm going to kill you from your mouth. And he just ripped him up from there. And so it looks like he was the shortest one. The Muslims fought. They fought through. And at the end of it, they became victorious. And in that day, and on such a day as today, Islam was preserved, such that Rasulullah made the following announcement. Had it not been for the wealth of Khadijah back in Mecca, or the sword of Ali, Islam would have perished. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us the shafa'ah of the Badriyun on such a day. We ask you, Ya Allah, to make us from those who stand against injustice, just like the righteous companions of the Messenger of God on such a day. We ask you, Ya Allah, to grant us the ziyarah of those who laid their lives for the sake of Islam and Muslimin, Ya Allah. We ask you, Ya Allah, to make us resurrected among those who are ahya'un inda rabbihim yurzuquna, Ya Allah. Allahumma rabba shahri Ramadhan, الذي أنزلت فيه القرآن وافترضت على عبادك فيه الصيام صل على محمد وآل محمد وارزقني حج بيتك الحرام في عامي هذا وفي كل عام واغفر لتلك الذنوب العظام فإنه لا يغفرها غيرك يا رحمن يا علام والحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين آل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم